Let's bring in now national immigration reporter for the New York Times, Caitlin Dickerson. She's out with a new piece about migrant families who are reunited after long separations at the border. Caitlin, tell us some of the stories you learned.
So I spent the summer talking to families who were separated from one another, children as young as 3, 4 years old who obviously couldn't tell me much at all the way up to 16, 17. And what I heard when I followed up with these people for the story we published today is that, they're very much still sitting with this experience every day. So, a little boy named Jesus, he's 6. He was trying to force his way into the kitchen on Christmas Eve, trying to help his mom cook, make tamales and make chicken. And his mom saying, no, go out in the living room, be a normal kid. But he never wants to leave his mother's side, And even much older children, a child who's 16 years old who told me about being in a shelter, and he was sort of watching younger children around him. This is during the time that he was separated from his dad. He was watching children around him break down into tears, scream and bang on the walls, and they were being met with threats. Basically, the caretakers who were looking after them were saying, if you don't behave better, you might not ever see your parents again. And so he told me about wondering quietly to himself. He didn't want to say anything out loud. He didn't want to get in trouble, but he wondered if his dad had left without him and gone back to Central America, because it was over a month before they ever got to talk on the phone. Another little boy, an 8-year-old named Justin, as soon as he was separated from his mother, he actually stopped talking. He barely speaks above a whisper now, and that's something that's still with him months later. So lots of parents told me that their children really regressed developmentally, and they're still trying to help those kids get back to where they were before the separation took place.
And Yamiche, we have heard from mental health care providers over and over again, the longer these children are kept in custody, the longer they are incarcerated, the longer they are separated from their parents, the more risks of severe mental issues later.
That's right, Joe. And I think that when we think about the trauma that these children endured and these teenagers endured, it's going to be long-lasting impacts on their life. I talked to a family that was a father that was deported without his young daughter. They were separated for more than 2 months. They were just reunited maybe about a month ago. And that father says that little girl cries all the time. She's frustrated with just like her life, and the idea that this is a little girl who's going to have to grow up now in Honduras, have to endure poverty, and not have the resources to get the proper counseling, to get the proper help for her trauma. I think a lot of these families, some of them might be lucky enough to be able to stay in the United States, but a lot of these families might be deported back to their home countries where resources are not going to be able to have them deal with the things that they've gone through. So I think it's a very, very sad thing, and we know that this is an ongoing thing, that there are still children that are separated, and there's no one in sight for some of these families.
Kurt, do you have a question for Caitlin?
I'm just curious, how do these kids, what is the plan to provide any support for these kids who are being torn away, who are being traumatized, who are just being put through some emotional strain that I don't think any of us could really possibly imagine? What is going to be done for them as this prolongs out and keeps going on without any real plan at all to deal with the amount of inflow that's coming in?
So a few things are happening. One is that first lawsuit, the forced family reunifications that the ACLU filed, that's still being litigated in court. And one of the things that the ACLU is pushing for is remedies for the families, some sort of psychological mental health support long term. Whether or not they get it is an open question that the judge hasn't ruled yet on. And in the meantime, what I heard from lots of families who are here in the U.S., especially in places like New York City, Los Angeles, is that, individual nonprofit organizations have stepped up to help these families and pay for, weekly counseling for some kids that I talked to. So they're getting help working through this. But as Yamiche pointed out, there are lots of families who are not going to be in a position to get those kinds of resources. Some who are in remote places in the United States. I've met families who are in Nebraska now who've gone to states that maybe don't have as much of an infrastructure for mental health, and maybe more importantly, don't have as much of an infrastructure for immigration advocacy work, right? Like in cities like New York City, these groups are everywhere. And then there's also the question of families who are back in Central America now I just talked the other day to one father who's concerned about how he's going to pay off his debt, which to the money that he paid to a coyote to get to the United States in the first place. He makes $4 a week. His 6-year-old has been returned to his home country, but he can't pay for counseling for her.
All right, Caitlin Dickerson, thank you so much for your reporting. It's so important. And the new piece, Caitlin's piece, is in the New York Times. And Yamiche, Brett, and Kirk, thank you all as well. We appreciate you coming in. And coming up, it's day 7 of the government shutdown and no sign of a compromise anywhere. The Washington Post's Robert Costa joins us next with his latest reporting. And did you see it? There was a strange blue light over New York City last night, and at least one official confirms it was not aliens, though if you checked your Twitter feed, it looked like it was something straight out of Stranger Things. We'll show you the pictures when Morning Joe returns. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.